Welcome, everyone, to Innovation Guelph Presents Toolkit Tuesday. I'm Mickey Campo, a program manager at Innovation Guelph, and I'm really happy to be here with all of you today. I'd first like to welcome our two friendly American Sign Language interpreters, whose time today is graciously provided in kind by Sign Language Interpreting Associates of Ottawa. So thank you, Samantha and Jeanette, for being here with us today. And of course, thank you to SLEO. So while I'm at it, I would like to thank our corporate sponsors, Ernst & Young, Reese Informatica, Invest in Guelph, BDO, and Bonsai Growth. We're very grateful for all of their support. Before beginning today's session, I would like to give recognition to the land that Guelph is on. We acknowledge that many others here today may be on different territory, so we invite and encourage each of you to give recognition to the land that you occupy today and every day. So as we gather for today's event, we are reminded that Guelph is situated on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history with home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people today. As a city, we have a responsibility for the stewardship of this land on which we live and work. And today we acknowledge the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Anishinaabe peoples of whose traditional territory we are meeting here today. So, today's webinar is called Goal Setting for Your Business and Your Life. And I hope that everyone here today is as excited over meeting with Kevin Boon, mentor here at Innovation Guelph, as we all are. So Innovation Guelph, just for those who don't know much about us, we are one of 17 regional innovation centers. And yes, we are located in Guelph, but we actually provide mentorship and project work for companies all throughout Canada. We do have a national program which allows us to have clients from BC all the way to Nova Scotia and everywhere in between. Our focus is mostly on Guelph, Wellington area, but we are working with clients throughout Southern Ontario and of course nationally. So we work with our clients, we help them, support them through multiple stages of business growth from startup to scale up. And we have lots of workshops and programs. We do an Innovation Expo trade show once a year that's coming up on October 13th. We do all kinds of introductions and provide as much assistance as we can to these scaling entrepreneurs. So enough about us. I would like to talk to you a bit about Kevin. So without further ado, Kevin is today's presenter. Kevin Boon started his career in the technology sector, helping Canadian businesses grow and expand globally. His natural talents evolved around building relationships and taking care of customers, helping businesses optimize their go-to-market practice, both in selling and marketing. For the past 10 years, he's had the opportunity to work with Innovation Guelph as a mentor, supporting hundreds of companies over the years. He often brings a fresh perspective and helps entrepreneurs gain more clarity and insight to identify and articulate their vision, using goal setting as one of the methods for moving forward and accomplishing critical tasks. So if you have any questions for Kevin throughout the presentation today, please use the Q&A feature and Shauna will monitor and ask your questions when the right moment happens during the presentation, or of course there'll be some time at the end of Kevin's presentation for an open Q&A session. So there is also the chat function. If you have anything you would like to say, feel free to use the chat function. But questions, if you could, in the Q&A, that would be great. It allows us to make sure your questions get answered in a timely fashion. So thank you very much for joining, and over to you, Kevin.
Welcome, and thank you for that introduction, Mickey. Much appreciated. I'm excited about this session today because we're going to dive deep into goal setting for your business and your life. As Mickey mentioned, I've been with Innovation Guelph for about 10 years, and in that time, I've met with many companies over the years. So we've had a chance to work on a number of these areas. So I just need to see if I can scroll through my slides here. And there we go. And Mickey's already talked about Innovation Guelph, so I'll move on from here. But In today's, just to give you an overview of where I want to go with this conversation is, I thought that in section 1, we can talk a little bit about what I like to call the art of goal setting. And we'll talk, just kind of do a little bit of, a dive into some examples and, how it kind of works intuitively. In section 2, we'll talk a little bit more about methodology and give some specific examples of how to apply goal setting for your business. Section 3, we'll talk about mentors, accountability, and dealing with change or even things like failure. When you struggle with goal setting, we're going to talk about some of the obstacles that you might run into. And in section 4, we will talk about resources. So welcome to the ride, everybody. So the art of goal setting. So I'd like to start with a quote. And I'm just going to have to do this so I can see my full screen. It says, if you want to be happy, set a goal that commands your thoughts, liberates your energy, and inspires your hopes. And just think about that as we go into the conversation today. So I would like to start by telling you a personal story. And this is a story about how I learned how to play the guitar. And I'm a person who likes to set New Year's resolutions. And in this particular year, it was 2003. And I had bought this wonderful brown guitar 2 years prior, and it had basically been sitting on the shelf for about 2 years. And 2003 was the time before YouTube, so there wasn't like a million and one YouTube videos that I could learn and practice from. But I had these books that I was trying to figure out how to play guitar, and they weren't helping me in any direction at all. So I set a goal for myself and said, I really want to learn how to play this year. And so as a task, I said, the only thing I need to do to achieve this goal is to find a guitar teacher and go to a lesson once a week for 1 year. That was it. That was my goal, one goal. And in that time, over the course of the year, I found a good guitar teacher in Kitchener. It was convenient that I could go when I was working in my job. I could actually go at lunchtimes 1 time a week. And it just worked. It just kicked in. And so within about a month or about 2 months, I was able to learn a few songs. I able to learn the skill of learning to sing while I was playing. And over the period of the course of the year, I actually had learned the skill of playing guitar. By the end of the year, I had also upgraded to an acoustic guitar, and I was playing in a band. And the reason why I share this story is because for me, I didn't really have a system in place at the time, but I had this idea that I had a vision. I was committed to taking action. And in that action was to create the results. And what was interesting with my desire to play the guitar is I had a passion and desire to follow through and take the action. So what I like about goal setting, and I love goal setting, quite frankly, is it's this idea that you can take the abstract, an idea. Oh, I'd like to play the guitar, a dream, a vision, and I can turn it into the practical. And so if you take a look online, goal setting is probably one of the most documented areas in business and in life that there is so much information out there. But one of the foundational elements is what we refer to as the S.M.A.R.T goal. And S.M.A.R.T goal was a system devised by George Doran back in 1981, really kind of like as a way to get organizations to achieve goals within that time period. And he came up with this system. And if we kind of break down each area, S.M.A.R.T is the acronym. So it's S.M.A.R.T. S stands for specific. The question becomes, what do you want to accomplish? And the idea is that if you set specific goals instead of being vague, it's very important to be specific in your goal setting. The second part is around measurability. How are you going to measure your progress and results and know if you've accomplished your goal? The third is what we call attainable, achievable. Sometimes people use different terminology depending on the group that you talk to, but basically, is your goal attainable? What steps do you need to take in order to accomplish your goal? Your goals can be challenging, but still reasonable to attain. The R is for realistic or relevant. Why do you want to achieve the goal? Determine if you have the resources or the ability to attain the goal. So, for example, a goal for me that would not be realistic would be to become an NBA basketball player, partly because I'm very short. I'm not 20. And if you saw my basketball playing skills, you know that I would have a high road to get to, especially to become a professional. So realistic and relevant is really important because, that's another key aspect. Are your goals timely? So this is the T in SMART goal setting. Do you have a specific deadline? And are you willing to hold yourself accountable? So even with my guitar playing, even though I hadn't, used the SMART method at the time to set that goal, the question became, as I started to use the SMART checklist, I started to realize is that my goal was specific. Yes, I want to play the guitar. If I go down to specifics, I can play certain songs or I know chords. I can be very specific on what the goal was. Was it measurable? Certainly was. It was measurable based on the number of times that I showed up to guitar lessons, how many times I practiced. Was it attainable, achievable? In my mind, I had very little resistance to being able to achieve the goal of playing music. I've talked to people before when they've learned to play piano or they've learned to play guitar, that for them, there's something about their belief that they get stuck. They don't believe that it's achievable at some level. So you've got to believe that it's achievable, attainable. Is it realistic, relevant? Of course. And was the goal timely? So the goal that I set back then was something that was very simple. It had one or two tasks, but if you take it in the framework of the methodology around goal setting, it fit all these criteria. So what we want to focus on today, because I know that many of you are business owners or entrepreneurs, really, it's really important to start looking at saying, okay, how do we apply the goal setting methodologies in our business? And so for me, in working with hundreds of entrepreneurs over the years, we've used goal setting for business planning, product development. You can use it in building your website, your marketing or your social media strategies, for sales planning or execution, for hiring or managing, building your financial strategy or attracting investors or growth for your business. You can also use it for events and a whole number of other areas. So there's many, many applications for your business. Many people also apply goal setting in their life. So this is another part that is just really critical for many of us. How do we plan our life? Especially things around finances, our career, our home, relationships, when we build families, our children, education, our personal goals around health, weight, fitness, nutrition, and then maybe our passion goals around travel, adventure, our passions, hobbies, and pursuits. So it's certainly, the methodology is very similar, whether it's business or personal goals. So I'd like to just share with you a few thoughts just to kind of get your thoughts, going here and the importance of goal setting. So here's a quote that says, people who write down their goals are 20% more successful in accomplishing them than those who do not. So that's important to know. Those who set actionable tasks for their goals and initiate weekly progress reporting to their supportive peers tend to achieve 40% more than those who do not. Goal clarity, that's probably being specific and measurable, has a direct influence on overall motivation in the workplace. Setting more challenging goals leads to achieving more, and receiving feedback is a good motivator to goal success. And I like this one because it says exactly 384 tests have shown that goal setting has a statistically significant effect on behavior. So it actually motivates us when we start to build goals. It can inspire us when we do it in a good fashion. And this is from a business coach that does work with helping clients. What I've learned about goal setting in my work with clients is, however, that we do have limits on our personal capacity to make things happen. So typically when we go in our day-to-day activities, or even if we're working on a teams, it's really hard for us to focus on a ton of goals. We usually need to find 3 or 5 goals at a time. And it's very important to have methodology when you're setting goals. So I'd like to ask you a question, and I'd just like you to think for a second, and I'll ask Shauna to facilitate this from the poll perspective. But on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your proficiency in achieving goals? And you can take a look at whatever part you want. Is it your business or career, your life, your relationships, your health, financial future, whatever that is? How would you say, what's your ability to achieve goals? How would you say on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you do with that? So we'll just give it a second here. And thanks for those participating in this. I think it's just really important to get a sense. So this is really good. And we're starting to get a sense of where people stand. Really, I like this idea. You know, there's some who are kind of in that 8 and 9, you know, like maybe 80 or 90% of their goals. You feel really confident in your ability to achieve your goals in your business or your career. Others are a little bit more middle of the road, you know, because sometimes we do hit obstacles. I like the fact in some ways that, you know, there's, you know, I have talked to companies or more individuals, but, you know, there are times when we struggle with goal setting, or we can get stuck in a rut that we're not accomplishing what we'd like to. So the good news here is that I think we all recognize is that we're never perfect, but we have the ability. But again, these stats, what you're sharing with me here, just show that, you know, this is typically what we see in the goal department. So Shauna, I don't know if you stop sharing that, or if you take that away, if I just go on. Oh, okay. Thank you very much for that. Do I just close that? I think I just talked that. I will just close it. Okay, so we'll move on. So this is just important for us to understand, right? There we go. So before I go on to methodology, I'd like to just see, is there any questions, comments, or thoughts on what we shared so far? And if not, we'll just kind of keep diving in.
Hi, Kevin.
Yep.
Just one question around what kind of methodology would you suggest using to measure goals?
Well, I think that's what we're going to dive into.
I guess that's what the slide cover is.
Yeah, well, we're gonna dive into that. So let's go into that, and I think we'll get some clarity on that. Again, let's dive in. Why don't we do that? And I can also give some examples too. Any other questions? Everybody's good? Okay.
Good for now.
I can't see you. So anyway, but thank you, Shauna and Mickey, for helping, making sure that we can hear you. So around methodology, a quote is, "Our goals can only be reached through a vehicle of a plan in which we must fervently believe and upon which we must vigorously act. There is no other route to success." And this is from Pablo Picasso. I like that quote because it's understanding this idea that there's a plan required, there's a methodology. And taking us back, and what I do like to use, for example, is coming back to the SMART goal system. To me, that is a foundational part that allows you to at least be able to, you know, have a bit of a benchmark or a framework with which you can build your goals, whether they're individual goals running a solopreneur type business, or whether they're team goals as part of a bigger vision where there's a group of you trying to build goals. Again, specific, measurable, attainable, achievable, realistic, relevant, and timely. So as much as there is a ton of information on goal setting, I will say to you, probably the best way to get started if you haven't done goal setting before, and it sounds to me like most of you have, but basically it's to write it down. Use the S.M.A.R.T template as a guideline for you, revise and edit, and create the habit. So in my working life, for example, I will always kind of like go through a year and say, okay, you know, what are my goals for the year? And I'll try to get a sense of what are some of the big picture goals I want to create. One of my colleagues, my mentoring colleague, Steve Barrett, works with clients what he calls a 90-day sprint. So basically, it's goal setting around this idea. What do we want to accomplish within 3 months or 90 days? And you build your whole goal structuring around a 90-day sprint. And I always love the way he articulated that with clients over the years. I take goals then and I split them down if we're doing a 90-day sprint, or even if we're just working on some things, you know, what's my monthly goals? What's my weekly goals? And then I take it down many times to a daily plan of action. So if I worked in sales roles for many years with organizations, and quite often the methodology that I used was around, number one, having the big picture, but it was very much figuring out what my quarter, what my month was going to look like, what my week, and being able to just structure my goals around that. And for me, the methodologies were simple: writing it down, recording it, and using the S.M.A.R.T templates. The S.M.A.R.T templates are very numerous out there because, like I said, goal setting is one of the most, discussed areas around, how businesses thrive and succeed. You know, there's a whole series of free templates that you can find online around using S.M.A.R.T goals. And I will also say there's other methods too that you can use for goal setting. So here's an example of some of the work that I've done in the last few years with some clients. And this is an example. I worked with a number of rural companies over the last few years. So it's typically farmers or people working in rural communities. And here's an example I'd like to share with you. And I thought we can just go through kind of a real life example of the goal setting process itself as a business. So here's an example of a farm selling fresh fruits and vegetables, let's say meat products, and they're an organic, regenerative farm. And currently their business model, they've been around for 20 years. It's a family-run business. They sell into farmers markets or people who order online and pick up from the farm. They're established. They actually have a website. They have social media. And they also have an email list, let's say, with 500 subscribers. And these clients and customers of theirs are mostly focused around Guelph and Wellington County. So working with clients and kind of going through that process, they set a goal and say, oops, just making sure I can, there we go. So the goal is, for this business, we want to build a new revenue stream. How do we create, rather than having customers always come to us or have to come to the farm, how do we create a delivery model to take products to customers and deliver, let's say, to Guelph or Wellington County, maybe Kitchener-Waterloo, right? And this is the idea. So stage one, when you're building a business goal like this, is you want to do the planning and brainstorming and really just kind of get a strong sense of the logistics. So this is where the questions around the who, the what, the why, when, where, and how are the questions that you want to ask for your business. So the question around who, for example, might be, well, who's our customer? So our customer may be consumers, it may be restaurants, it may be grocery stores. You decide on who is my customer, and the farm would, or the farmers, if they've got established clients, would typically know who they want to target. Well, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to get a delivery truck on the road or our car, and we're going to deliver into Guelph once a week for the next 3 months and give it a shot. Why are we going to do it? Well, we know that we're trying to get our products to market, and we want to make sure that or we just want to build this revenue stream as an opportunity to sell more product. When are we going to do it? You set a timeline. Where? How are we going to do it? So how might become around logistics, around, it could be around marketing and promotion. It could be social media. It could be creating flyers. How do we connect with people online through email subscriptions or something along that lines? So stage 1 is all about the planning and brainstorming. Stage 2 really is about the action, and probably the most important part to goal setting that gets you committed is to set a date. So let's suppose that you set this for the 30th of the month, let's say the 30th of September, and you said, okay, now we need to take these logistics that we've identified and we need to act and execute on the plan. So second is act and execute on the plan. And then third is to create milestones and measure along the way. So if you've given yourself enough bandwidth from a time perspective, you can check out at the end of week 1, how did we do this week with our action? Week 2, how are we doing? Are we building momentum? Week 3, are we getting better? Do we have it? And then step 4 is, boy, here's the date. Today's the day we deliver. And you go out and complete the goal, so to speak. So the most important piece then, all of these are important pieces, but stage 3 then is once the goal is completed or once the timeline has finished, you start to measure and assess. So did we achieve the goal? Did we not? How did we do? Did we meet our goal? How many deliveries did we do? How many people did we access within our existing mail list? Did we find new people that subscribed? What did we learn? Were people satisfied? Were they happy? And then what you do in the measurement and assessment phase is review, revise, refine. And in the business model world, right, we replicate. If we're successful with our goal, we're going to figure out how we can do it again and do it better. And that is really typically the methodology. So I want you to step back and just think about your own business for a second, but ask yourself, what is it that you want to accomplish? And I don't really have that chance to have that dialogue with you directly here, but ask yourself, is your goal setting for this year? Is it this quarter? I could even go back and say, is it for the next 3 to 5 years? Is it this year? Is it this quarter, this month, this week, today? And start to do the things of asking the questions, what does success look like? What action is necessary? What is the path? And grab a pen and paper, your tablet, or collaborate with your team and write it down. So quite frankly, it's pretty straightforward, but it is something that takes work, and you have to put the time in to be thoughtful about how you plan to work on your goals. Some of the common pitfalls and mistakes of goal setting, quite frankly, is sometimes we have a zillion things that we want to do, and we have far too many goals. And what happens is we become paralyzed with complexity. I don't want to, so points 1 and 2 here, but too many goals. I found ideally that if a company that is starting or growing, if you have 3 to 5 goals that you're working on, and I mean significant goals, then that's typically quite a bit that will keep you busy for quite a period of time. Sometimes goals are created and they're too complex to begin with. So they're like in the SMART setting method, they're vague or they have too many moving parts. You sometimes have to find ways to break it down. Otherwise, it can feel overwhelming. And I've noticed this when I've worked with a lot of times with solopreneurs who are trying to wear many hats and are trying to do too many things. So we have to find ways to bring it down to the simple and say, what's the task here? What's the task there? And then what's the action we need to take? The other mistake that I see companies make is that they are too aggressive with their goal setting. And what they do is they don't give themselves enough time and they expect the results too fast. Sometimes you have to take a goal and say, you know what, we need a 3-month window to make this work. And it depends on the goal. It could be a 1-year window, but we need a significant period of time that allows us to achieve this goal. When I learned how to play guitar right, I gave myself 1 year. I could have probably done it shorter, but at the same time, I wanted to make sure I had enough time that I wasn't going to stress myself out. Other times, the pitfalls are that it's not measurable or specific enough. Another big one that I found, and this is where mentoring and coaching can help entrepreneurs, is that we sometimes set goals and focus on goals that are not tied to what's important. So, for example, we end up doing busy work or distractions. I had one client a few years ago, and they were really needed to build their sales. And the goal was that I wanted them to focus on was building their pipeline. You need to go and talk to 50 companies to start to get this pipeline building. But every time we would have meeting, and this happened for just a short period of time. But what happened as we were having our meetings is they kept coming back and telling me about the one big fish they had as their client. And when we talked about the work they were doing to build the pipeline, they weren't taking that action. So we had to refocus and say, and one of the big fish they had was like a city, like it was, who takes like 2 years to make a decision. It's those things that when we don't set the goals tied to what's critical, we can lose our focus. Goals as well. I think that we sometimes have what I call the must-do goals, not the passion goals, and sometimes and you can measure that within yourself when goal setting feels like a burden. You're going, oh my God, I'm just dreading doing this financial spreadsheet here. That would be my issue, but what I'm saying is that you want to be able to make sure that you've got movement with your goals and that there's passion that's coming underneath it. And then finally, this idea that sometimes we get too caught up in the vision, the bigger vision, but we don't acknowledge the obstacles or the work that's going to be required to make the goal a reality. So those are pitfalls. And I could have probably turned that into like 5 or 6 slides, but anyway, hopefully you get a good sense of that. Here's another point that I want to share is what SMART goals don't cover. And this is why you want to expand your learning around goal setting. SMART goal setting quite often focuses on results-driven versus habits-driven. And the brief distinction, right, is that if I'm setting a sales goal and I want to achieve $100,000 this year or this month in sales, and I set the goal and I do everything to hit towards that goal. If I miss a day or if I miss a week, I can always come back and kind of correct myself. But in habits-driven goal, so for example, if I say I want to eat better, I want to eat less carbs, eat less sugar, and take care of my health more. And if all of a sudden you have a day where you're going to go off the wagon and have a binge day, it's almost like the habit gets lost, it's the habit that you need to correct. And the habits versus just the task goals can be there's a difference there. There's a difference in mindset that you need to think about. So I also believe, and this is my philosophy, is around there's also a psychology to goal setting. And SMART goals don't always cover this. So I kind of talk about, knowing yourself, who are you? Are you an extrovert? Are you an introvert? Are you an outgoing personality? Are you more reserved? What are your natural talents? What are things that really inspire you? And do your own self-assessment. How good am I at habits? What disciplines do I need to take on? What's my ability to take action? And then I would also look at things, and what I look for in entrepreneurs when I coach them is understand what are their personality traits. When I kind of talk to them, what level of confidence do they have in their ability to achieve their goals? Are they generally positive or do they lean negative? What's their drive, tenacity? What's their passion, charisma? And again, we can go into things like values and belief systems, passions, desire, motivations, what drives you. The other area that I would take a look at for myself as I do my own self-assessment is look at my internal psychology. What are my fears? What are my triggers? What are my blind spots? And so as I go through things like this, tools that have helped me to really assess where and get better at goal setting have been to take things like the Myers-Briggs assessments. There's one that I really like called the U-Map, which is done through Gallup, where it helps me for this. This is my top 5 my top 5 natural talents. And so strategic makes me good for working with clients and helping them. Restorative is great at problem solving. Connectedness and empathy are about people, and responsibility is about the ability to, to be committed to to follow through on what I promise. And I found actually that understanding these natural talents for me have been critical when I do things like goals, because there's certain goals that I won't take on because they don't go within my natural abilities. Inner psychology as well. I think that if you are running a business or at any stage in your life, eventually you are going to hit the fear barrier. Like I said, when I learned how to play guitar, there was no fear for me in that goal, but there are certain goals that I've certainly had in my career where the fear barrier hit. So sometimes for people, it's the fear of public speaking, or it's the fear of putting yourself out there on social media. It's that fear of rejection, fear of, ridicule or condescension, whatever it is. There's a great book that was from years ago. This was one of the early books that I read called Fear the Fear and Do It Anyway. The Courage Habit is another one. Arianna Huffington has a great quote here. She says, "Fearlessness is like a muscle. And I know from my own life that the more I exercise it, the more natural it becomes to not let my fears run me." So if there's anything I can say to you about goal setting, really take a look at your fears. And if they come up, figure out and work with your teams, your mentors, yourselves, read books, and figure out how to work through that stuff. There's also what I call the science of goal setting. And if you really dive deeply into goal setting, there are those who are doing phenomenal things online and like through publications and through research. This is Dr. Emily Balcetis, who's an associate professor of psychology at New York. There was a interview or a podcast that she did with Andrew Huberman, but she has a book called Clearer, Closer, and Better. And they really drilled into the details around goal setting. And one of the things that she mentioned was this idea of the proximity hypothesis. And what she said is that the data shows that the closer we get to a goal increases the likelihood we will achieve it. So I don't know, I used to be a cyclist. I used to ride bikes and, sometimes long distance. And if I was riding for 2 or 3 hours on the road, quite often, when I would kind of get to some of the last turns or the last 2 or 3 kilometers, I might be totally spent for energy. But the thing is that I found that extra drive to go after and get to the goal. And this has been my experience in business as well. So, and I'm sure, anyway, I hope I was clear on that. But this idea of that the closer you get to your goal gives more motivation to actually achieve that goal. So I'd like to just hold it there for a second, just before I go into the next section, and ask if there's any other questions.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple. One question is, how do you find the balance between the big goals, but also setting those smaller goals to help with motivation and feeling accomplished?
Yeah, that's a great question. Sometimes when we do work with clients, that's, let's say, bigger picture, right? You ask a question, what's your vision of the business? What's your next 3 to 5 goals, 3 to 5 year goals? Quite often, the thing that we do in those bigger goals is we really just develop more the outline for it. We're not usually putting together the action strategies for like the bigger goals. But what happens is if you have a bigger goal like that, this is where you need to drill it down to say, well, what are we going to do this year? And then you can start to articulate the action methods necessary to kind of achieve. So for example, let's suppose that we were doing a marketing campaign or, and said, hey, we're going to start doing blog posts, case study articles on our clients. And we want to have one blog post once a month for the next 12 months. So what happens is you take this bigger vision and you say, the bigger vision is, well, we want to create a repository of content that people are going to be able to find searchable, that's going to help our SEO and growth and help our marketing communications. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to do this series of blog articles, or let's say videos, YouTube videos. And what's our frequency? We're going to do it once per month over the course of the next 12 months. What do we have to do? We have to figure out our content. What are we going to do each month? So you start to drill it down and you become more specific. So then when I come to the month, I say, okay, this month, man, if I don't do anything else, I need to write this article, get it published, and get it promoted. And my deadline is the middle of the month, the 15th of the month. So the thing about it is that it is very important that you take vision and you bring it down to actionable results at some level. And I hope that was kind of clear on that.
Thanks, Kevin. One more for you. How far in advance should you be setting goals? Is it reasonable to make a 5-year plan?
I always ask when I work with people, even though it can be like, it can seem, kind of a little bit out there for people, I will always ask them for their business, what's your vision? What do you want to do with this? And sometimes people will say to me, what, I've got a family, I've got, things that I want to do. I want to have independence in my life. I'm interested in freedom. I like the idea of having a team working with me. I want to build a business that has 10 employees or 20 employees. That's what they want to do. Other people will say, I want to build a business and build this technology. And within 3 to 5 years, I want to sell it to Google and become a gazillionaire, whatever that is, right? And the thing is that to me is the big vision. What's the vision? What's the end game for where you want to go? All right. Are we good? Any more questions?
Yeah, I'll leave the next couple until the end in case you address some of that in this section.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so let's move on here. So part 3, mentors, accountability, and dealing with change. Oops, I kind of get into whenever I press a button here. Help me. There we go. So a mentor is someone who sees more talent and ability within you than you see in yourself and helps to bring it out of you. And I really think that, a lot of times, when we have conversations with others, I always look for, what is that spark within a person, or what's that skill? What's that value they bring into the world? And to me, that is, that's what I see when I do mentorship. So mentors in your team is probably, one of the most important pieces that you can have as you assemble your business, especially if you work in an environment where you're the solo owner of your business, or you're a solopreneur, right? So what mentors do is they provide an extra set of eyes. They provide outside input, especially when you are immersed in your business. One of the most common statements I get from people when we first start a mentoring relationship is they'll come to me at the end of a meeting and say, oh my God, I've never really had anybody to talk to about what I'm doing. And we say, yeah, you need to do that. You need to get this stuff off your chest, because a lot of times they've been struggling with goals or struggling with problems. And a lot of times there's an importance to being able to have that extra set of eyes. So mentors are sounding boards for ideas. The ideas don't have to be perfect, but they can be refined and honed with the help of mentorship. For solopreneurs, it is essential that you have a mentor, sometimes multiple mentor or colleagues that you can share what's going on. And when you set goals, the mentors should be aware of your SMART goals and objectives, and they should encourage you to keep on track and assess progress together. Create a strategy together, track your progress. Setting transparent goals that you then can share with your team, your mentor, your partner, help increase your likelihood of success. And I can't say to you, and I would say in my own life, it's what I've noticed is that, there's a part sometimes where we struggle to ask for help. But mentorship is about help and support. And that's really important. The other piece is about accountability. And quite often a question that comes up in goal setting is, should you share your goals with others? And I would say, to answer that question, is you don't necessarily share your goals with everybody, but you certainly share them with trusted people. And I'm not necessarily talking family or friends here, but I'm talking about people that have that either that mentorship or that knowledge capacity that's going to be able to help you. If you work as a team, accountability is often built into the framework. So you typically have to report to your boss or what have you. If you work as a solopreneur or make decisions about your business on your own, then you have to build in your strategies around accountability. You've got to find a way, if you've got a deadline that we're going to launch this website by mid-October, then what's your accountability structure towards that? This is where habits, practicing your own emotional resiliency come from. And I would say this, that without accountability or follow through on our goals, we can start to develop the habit of not achieving. And when we develop the habit of not achieving our goals, this can erode our confidence level and our self-esteem over time. So goal setting, quite often, your ability to meet your goals can tap into your self-esteem in both a positive and a negative way. Individual or team goal setting, like I said about individuals, I think I've covered it already. The importance of mentors, accountabilities, and keeping yourself on track. There's a lot of moving parts you usually have to take care of. Team goal setting is a different perspective, and I'd like to just share an example. About 5 or 6 years ago, I was working within a team, and I'm going to just read some of this to start it. But the CEO came in and said, we're going to create an event. And it was a national competition allowing participants from across Canada to pitch in front of judges for the opportunity for the winner to receive a $30,000 scholarship from an organization called Singularity University in California. Now, Singularity University is where some of the top minds, entrepreneurs, innovators go to learn skills that are going to create the next wave of new innovations that happen in the culture. So it was a big competition. But we set this goal that we had to set it. We had a 3-month time window. And in that time, as a team, we had to raise $60,000 in funds from sponsors. We had to go and find people that were going to pay us money to actually run this event. $30,000 was to pay for the event. $30,000 was to pay for a scholarship for the winner. The second one, we had to set up our systems. So we had to set up a system to recruit candidates from across Canada. And we had never done that before. We had always promoted or worked with clients locally. We had to find a venue. We had to find people who wanted to pitch. We had to create marketing materials. We had to fill a 200-seat auditorium. We had to create content, flyers, and we had to get the word out. And we had 3 months. So let me take you through this slide because this is how we executed. Stage 1 was planning. The CEO brought the team together for a number of meetings, and we brainstormed each problem. Like I said before, the who, how, what, where, why example, identified what had to be done in each area, and then we had to delegate tasks. Stage 2 was delegation. There was a team, I think, of about 6 of us, and so we all took on specific tasks. Some were shared, and communication was key. So, for example, for the senior leadership team, we all took on the role of finding sponsors and money and reaching out to our business networks to see who would fund the project. Step 3 was action, getting it done within the timeline, and the critical part to action was daily communication. This is a program, an event that required daily connection. The event itself, stage 4, was a smashing success. We held the event. This was in Guelph at S.M.A.R.T's auditorium, 200 plus people in attendance, and 6 participants flown in from across Canada. There was a panel of judges, and eventually a winner later announced. Stage 5, after the event, I will say to you that a lot of us just kind of did a sigh of relief and said, oh, it's over. We're done. Thank God we did it. But we asked, how did we do? What could we do better? And you know what? We congratulated ourselves, and every person on that team stepped up. And this is the importance, when you're building goals within teams, you really need to make sure that people, or that you bring the teams together. So that's an example of that. The last thing I want to cover is this idea of the challenges that we face in goal setting. And quite often, we can, when I'm going to give the example, when COVID hit back in March 2020, every client that I worked with at Innovation Guelph and in other areas, was struggling. And many of them had to revise their entire business plans. So many of these companies were no longer able to meet with or sell to clients face-to-face. One of our clients did farm tours. They did a lot of work face-to-face with clients, and those revenue streams stopped. So fortunately, and the term we use in entrepreneurship is called pivot, but they were able to work and transition to selling their product online, setting up a delivery model, and that revenue enabled them to actually grow and sustain themselves during the critical phases of the pandemic. Not all companies were that fortunate. Some companies really struggled. So the ability to pivot is critical, and that to me is a part of goal setting. You go down one path with a set of goals, and then you say, wow, we've got to reassess, and we're finding that that's not working. Your ability to shift focus quickly is a critical skill within goal setting. The other thing that I want to share with is failure, because I think at any stage, all of us at some stage in our life or our business or our careers have gone through failure. I want to read this too, because we all fail at a goal. Goal setting is not perfect for everybody. Even the most successful people fail a lot. We try something, we try to execute, and the outcome's not what we expected. Obstacles are bigger than we expected. Life events get in the way, or we didn't understand all the factors needed to execute. So coming back from failure or burnout or mounting stresses is really our ability to step back, to practice self-care, talk with our mentors, friends, colleagues, and find the ability to kind of get back in the saddle and do it again. There's no such thing as failure. You just set a new goal. And that's what I want to leave you with that. So I'm going to finish here, and we can chat about questions here in a second, but I'll just share this slide. Like I said, goal setting is probably one of the most documented areas for content. There are great resources online for videos that teach you about goal setting, audios. Pinterest has a wealth of materials like templates on goal setting. There are apps that are there. And I really want to thank you for taking the time with me today. Here's a quote from Amelia Earhart: "Decide whether or not the goal is worth the risks it involves, and if it is, stop worrying." So that's it for today. Thank you, everybody. And like I said, Shauna, I'll pass it over to you if there's any other questions.
Great, Kevin. Thank you. That was very informative. One thing I'd like to say just for myself is I find that sometimes you can be afraid to start setting goals because you're worried how you'll feel if you don't meet them. So I really like what you said about having that ability to change your goal, because that's definitely something that I have felt myself.
Yeah.
Let me turn to the questions. One question is, are there important goals a business owner should be setting, or does it depend on the type of business?
When I look at, I think that, so I've worked with businesses across sectors. So I've worked with technology companies, I've worked with manufacturing companies, I've worked with farmers, like I said, food companies. And quite frankly, I find that even though the businesses can be different sometimes in terms of the types of customers or logistics, the methodology requires goal setting around the same. So for example, if you're going to build a website, what are you going to do? Well, we need to plan the website. What's it going to look like? What are we going to say? So typically you need an about page, you need a products page, you need some sort of, if you're doing an online store, a way to contact you, marketing, social media, right? So the answer to that question, if I understand it correctly, is that there's a lot of methodologies that are shared within sectors, but when you drill down sometimes to specific, it's just you're talking to different people. So that's the thing to think about. So I hope that answered that question.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. The next question, can we discuss really simple goal setting, something that doesn't require one to carve out more time from their already busy days?
This is where I would get into the habit of doing daily goal setting and kind of getting your, first of all, sometimes we need to say, what are my big tasks for the day? What are goals that I'm working towards? And then really just find a way to just have a measurement that kind of gets you from one stage to another through that. I don't know if this is relevant, but I'm going to say to you that when I used to work in sales years ago for a tech company, one of the managers that I worked with used to say, he had a habit for us. And he says, once a week, on Friday afternoon, I want you to give me your 5:15 report. That's what he used to call it. And the 5:15 report for me became probably one of the most valuable tools that I ever had, because basically he wanted a summary of what I did that week, just in a paragraph. He wanted highlights of the key accounts that I worked with, any obstacles, like anything like that, but it was all highlight form. And then he wanted just me to say, what am I going to do next week? And so I started to write, take the last half an hour of my day and just kind of write down and say, what did I do this week? And I reflected on, I got this goal accomplished. I closed this sale. I did this. And then I would write it down, send it to him, and then I'd print it off for myself. And this is a mind thing too. Printed it off for myself, put it in my computer, closed my computer, and forgot about my job for the weekend. I'll say that, right? When I came in on Monday mornings, I just opened it up, took a look at what I did last week, and I was very clear right at the beginning of the week what my accomplishments were and what my goals were for this week. I don't know if that helps, but to me, it is about the whole thing is finding simplicity and simple methods that you can do quickly. So,
yeah, definitely, that's great. How do you know when to give up on a goal if it's not getting accomplished? When do you kind of let it go?
Yeah, that's a good one. Sometimes we put the cart before the horse, and sometimes we're trying to do a whole bunch of things, but we're not ready for it. And how do you assess that? It's obviously, I think sometimes what I notice, if I have a goal and I say I'm going to get this solved this month or this, and if I'm kind of moving towards that goal and things just don't seem to be moving, or there's delays, or there's just things, or even my own internal obstacles, then what I will do with goals typically is start to just ask the question and saying, okay, is this the right goal? Are the timelines right? Is it something that is not the right goal? Maybe it's just something, like I said, we're push something, but goals shouldn't always be about pushing it. It should almost be a natural progression. So, and it's a self-assessment thing. You've got to be able to assess that. If you're in a team or if you're leading a team, you've got to be able to have the leaders or the management or the team leaders that are saying, you know what, this is not working. We need to come up with a fresh approach.
Great. I just have one more question. Oh, actually, never mind. A couple came through, so I'll get to those after. Do you have any techniques that you use for holding yourself accountable to your goals, or that you recommend to teams for staying accountable to their goals?
For myself, I would say that the habit of writing it down, and then the whole idea of the systems, some of the systems I've already talked about, is when I write it down, like I typically use my computer, right? I'll write out my goals. I'll have a little bit of a template that I use, and then I will focus on, hey, here are the goals that I'm trying to achieve. If I there's a time where I do self-reflection and I go, how did I do? You know, have I got that? You know, and if I have to build your own accountability into it. And for me, if I've done something and said, you know what, I haven't accomplished that goal, then I need to bring myself accountable. There are times that I do find that it's important to just share my goals. Like I do share my goals a lot with people, trusted people. In team settings, this is probably the most important direction that a manager or a team lead does, is about, again, it's keeping kind of the team accountable. They need to be keeping an eye on the big picture. Are we getting there? You know, how are we doing this week? You check in with those people and see how it's progressing. Very critical.
Thank you. Okay. What is the best practice for a goal framework for a small manufacturing business? Example, an overall strategic plan yearly or every second year, or operational plans for specific for departments, etc.
Yeah. So I've worked with, and I'm going to make an assumption here, but I'm going to assume that this is a manufacturing company that has, maybe been around for 10 years or been around for a period of time. And you've got employees, right? Let's say you've got a dozen or a couple of dozen employees. To me, what I would do is I want to lay out the bigger vision, 3 to 5 years. We've done Innovation Guelph projects where we've had industry specialists come in and do projects that are about strategic planning, as it's called, right? It's what is it that you want to do? And then we drill it down into what are we going to do this year? What are the executable strategies? And so you build a 3 to 5 year, build it down into a 1 year plan. But then from an overall management point of view, the leader or CEO of the organization or the executives, again, it's really important that you have, both a management and accountability structure that helps lead people towards goals. Success for teams quite often is dependent on a leader's ability to help the team achieve the goals.
Great. I have one more question, unless anyone's furiously typing out their last questions. The 3 to 5 company goals have 4 to 5 sub goals associated with them, delegated to others in the company, totaling 12 to 25 goals altogether. How does the executive team manage that many goals to come together in the 3 to 5 goals they came up with?
Very carefully. Sorry, that was my attempt at humor. This is where the role of the leadership or the CEO needs to be able to carry the bigger vision. So if I was a leader managing, an individual, then number one is I would have very clear understanding of what their goals were, what we've agreed to, and then I would have regular check-in to just make sure things are on track. And usually there's obstacles or struggles or delays, and need to just kind of bring them back on track. So the vision of the leader or the senior managers quite often is to, and it's using a combination of delegation, but it's also management working communication direct with those individuals to help make sure that they're on track. And if there's any of those goals or tasks, for example, that are critical to the project running, you need to be just in good communication with your team. So this is about also management, right? Managing and leading your team is a big part of goal setting.
Great. I will just turn to Mickey if she'd like to close us out.
Sure thing. Thanks, Kevin. I think you're onto something. I mean, I think communication and talking to your team is so very important when it comes to goal setting. So I agree with you there. Thank you. I think we all have to go away and think about what our goals should be and how to write them down and how to make them SMART and what we're going to do to celebrate at the end of it, because that's the fun part, right? When you reach your goals and can assess it and then celebrate. But that's awesome. So thank you so much for joining us today, and everybody on the call. Thank you. Really, if you have any questions for Kevin or you want to reach out to Innovation Guelph, you can reach out to Shauna or I. We'll get you in touch with the right people. Before you all disappear, Shauna has posted a feedback form link in the chat, so please click on it and share your thoughts with us. Let us know if you have any topics that you would like us to attack in another month. We'd be happy to do that. And again, thank you so much to our SLEO interpreters today and to all of our sponsors, to Shauna, to Kevin, to all of you. Thank you very much for joining us today, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right.